Hi, this is part four of why the interest in the horror behind horror stories. So, as I'm saying, indigenous societies were much more inclined, not all of them, right? But obviously, many of them, like I'm talking about the Bantu culture, which where Ubuntu comes from, were much more inclined with understanding the need to keep a person, an entity intact emotionally, physically, psychologically, and spiritually, right? And so there was very much an interest in getting to the root cause of things. People were never just punished for what they did, but there was an effort made to understand why they did what they did and where that hatred that they expressed when they did something negative actually comes from, you know, and that hate that they were given, who gave them that hate, who made them feel that sense of shame, who made them feel that they were like at the risk of suffering life-threatening abandonment and rejection, right? And I think in some societies, really, if people did something bad, their parents and their clan, their family would be asked, like, what happened to this person? And no one would be allowed to just get off the hook and say, hey, we don't know. No, no, you were there. Something happened when this predator was being formed. And I think it's very important that as people, we start to look at these root causes. Let's look at patriarchy, as a serious cause of a lot of the social malaise. Because if you look at what patriarchy does, it distorts reality. So already it's a problem. You can't function successfully if you are living in distorted reality, right? And you can't function properly with your fellow human beings if you are not identifying them properly as what they are. So patriarchy causes men and women to be forced into identifying pretty much entirely solely with their ego expression, with their physical body, right? The spiritual person inside who's actually animating the body is utterly ignored and is forced to be subsumed to the ego. Already, that's going to cause a lot of problems and dysfunction because that soul has a reason for being here and has an expression. But if your patriarchal system says, for example, women are not allowed to go to university and study medicine, guess what's going to happen? That person's soul is not going to be able to fulfill its reason for coming here. It's going to be in a state of repression, which psychologists will tell you is not going to cause that reason for being here to disappear. It's going to bleed out in destructive ways, as Sigmund Freud said. So it's the same thing. Now this is something which I touched on, but I didn't actually elaborate because I went on another tangent. But it's this, besides the actual physical horror that we see people do, what about the emotional and mental and spiritual horror that people inflict on themselves and that they inflict on other people because of this shame, because of this sense of worthlessness, because of this internalized fear of rejection that is so deep that you will literally contort yourself into any shape that you think you have to in order to be loved and validated by your parents, by your family, by your teachers, authority figures, peer group, whoever you feel that your survival depends on, emotional survival, emotional integrity, for example, you will contort yourself. So think about when you are having to pretend to agree or you actually have come to agree with someone who tells you that you're worthless. How many books that could have changed lives, songs that could have changed lives, dance choreographies, works of art, sculptures, lessons in philosophy, scientific breakthroughs, inventions that could have made life better for human beings, that ideas, philosophies that could have elevated the consciousness of human being, has humanity been deprived of because the people that those things were supposed to come through were told that they are worthless and that they have nothing to offer and that their survival depends on them agreeing with them being worthless and having nothing to offer. You know what I'm saying? So it doesn't work for a lot of people. That's why the self-help industry makes lots of money because people desperately want to get out of this sense of worthlessness and shame, but then a lot of them are not dealing with why people are not able to be productive. It's not enough to tell someone, do this, do this, do this, do that. You can wake up at 5 o'clock, you can go to the gym, you can clean your house, you can, have a hobby, you can find yourself in emotional relationships. But until you deal with that hate you were given as a little infant that's screwing you up, you're not going to be able to sustain any of these things. Why are so many people unable to hold on to their New Year's resolutions? They know they want to do these things. They know they deserve to have a better life cerebrally. But in your heart, in your subconscious, what have you internalized so deeply that makes you believe that you don't deserve to achieve your goals? That you don't deserve to be the great thing that you want to be? Because that's what it is that causes you to abandon these very lofty and admirable New Year's resolutions. So I think, in conclusion, as human beings, we live in a world where we are systematically traumatized. It's been hijacked by a consciousness which you can describe as narcissistic. It wants everything for itself and everyone must serve it. And if anyone tries to challenge it or act outside of the bounds of how it defines human beings, those people will be punished. Patriarchy has punished women for thousands of years. The religious systems that patriarchy has created has punished women. Patriarchy has removed the mother aspect of God from religion. And where the mother aspect still remains, she is always made subordinate to her male aspect. But in the beginning, none of that was the reality. And it is not the reality. The reality is the yin and the yang, equals that are seeming opposites, but are two parts of the same whole, which within themselves carry the identity of the other. That's why each person has a male and female counterpart within themselves. That's why you can say a woman is in her masculine energy or is in her feminine energy. We have both, you know what I'm saying? And that's the reality. So we have to bring back this balance. We have to become people who are mature and courageous enough to look into the darkness that motivates the horrible things that people are doing to each other. I've spoken very much on a personal, individual level, but the people who run the social, political, and economic institutions that govern our world are also individuals. What do they believe about themselves that makes them feel that it's perfectly reasonable to manipulate their citizens so that they can achieve some sort of financial or political or social goals or achieve some sort of currency or status? You know what I'm saying? How do you justify that in yourself? What do they believe about themselves that makes them believe that they have the right to do that? It's very important. But I do also believe that much more on the individual level, on just the normal people, citizen level, the more that we develop a sense of our intrinsic value, when we bring, like how Carl Jung says, if you do not make the subconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. The subconscious is those patterns that you repeat, the addictions that you have, negative relationships you keep calling into your life or accepting into your life. Why? It's not fate. You're not destined to never have a functional relationship. There's something inside you that makes you believe that love has to be a battlefield, as that song goes, that love has to be a situation where you are begging someone for validation. Why? It's probably because you come from a family where they made you perform for approval, where it wasn't just given freely, where if it was given, it's because you really, you almost broke your back trying to achieve that thing. And even then, it was always like never just as good as it could possibly be, So I think in understanding the horror behind horror stories, we are called upon to heal ourselves and to be people who encourage other people to heal and who show people the resources that they can use to heal, so that we can stop this with us as this generation, so that our children only have to deal with whatever latent trauma that we gave them before we were healed, but so that they can now create a new world where there is peace and love and truth. Thank you.